really recognizing self-care. And I think everyone who is in this field, everyone I've met, is a go-getter who is motivated, who is smart. And sometimes I think what isn't taught in our profession is that self-care.
Do you ever have so many questions and no one to ask, so they're just wasting away on Google searches you'll forget about in an hour or so?
We had that same problem, and that's why we created the RD2BE podcast, a resource for dietetic and nutrition students looking for answers that their peers don't have.
We are students Macy and Emily and registered dietitian Carl Barnes. We engage in conversations and learn from RDs.
Join us weekly as we gain insight into the unique journeys of registered dietitians all over the country.
Emily, thanks for having me. I'm Dr. Nicole Withrow. I'm the Dietetic Internship Director at the University of Northern Colorado. I'm also a clinical pediatric dietitian at the Colorado Children's Hospital. So I'm there once a week and I'm in developmental pediatrics.
Great. So would you mind just briefly describing a little bit of your background and then what you do on a day-to-day basis as a program director?
Sure. So my background, I attended Purdue University and got a bachelor's in sociology and decided to shift gears. I wanted to better understand the physiology of eating disorders. So I came out west from the Midwest and received my master's of science in nutrition from Colorado State, and then did the internship program through Colorado State. And then several years later, I went back and did my doctorate there. And so my day at UNCO is every day is a little different. I have anywhere from 30 to 40 interns, and it's a combined program. We have two programs actually, an MSDI and a DI, and they're all the dietetic internship is 100% distance for both programs. So the MSDI consists of 3 years, and the students take classes for the first 2 years, and then they matriculate into the distance dietetic internship program with the post-baccalaureate. So you all become one cohort. So we accept anywhere from 30 to 40. And so my day is really truly facilitating the internship requirements, especially because of COVID. I'm doing more hands-on teaching through simulations, role playing. Last semester, well, actually the last 2 semesters, I facilitated more of an outpatient clinic where the interns would be the acting dietitian. And so we would do assessments and then follow-ups. And so it was super fun to do that and to kind of guide them through their clinicals and especially outpatient. And we do a lot of role playing and whatnot. And then if you didn't do part-time hours with me, you always have a virtual office hour every week. And that's where we, again, do a lot of hands-on training, education, case studies, guest speakers. And so I prepare a lot for that during the week. We also, being a distance program, all interns really create their own program with guidelines from us. So I work with the preceptors. I'll train them. We'll talk about assignments, how to fulfill core competencies. So that's a lot of the day. Also, admin work to run the internship is a portion of my day. And then really answering questions, putting out fires, lots of meetings, and so on and so forth with running a distance program.
So there's no in-person for University of Northern Colorado?
No. So we used to hold, Emily, a 3-day orientation on campus. And orientation is mandatory to begin your rotations. But because of COVID, we've switched it to 100% online. So unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, you're not required to come to Greeley, Colorado anymore.
So when you say 30 to 40 interns, is that for each program, 30 to 40 for the master's dietetic internship, and then 30, 40 for just the dietetic internship, or is that combined, or what's that?
That's a great question. So it's kind of loose right now. So because the standards are changing to a graduate level field for 2024, we're really focusing on growing the MSDI and probably decreasing a little bit of the standalone non-degree seeking internship. So right now we're set at 30 and 30, so a total of 60, but I think we're beginning to shave off some of the DIs.
So where do people generally apply from? I don't know if you would be able to give off round numbers, but is it, Colorado residents? Is it East Coast, West Coast, Midwest? What's your breakdown look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So about 40% come from Colorado area, not just metro, but all over Colorado, and then 60 all over the nation. So we have, a handful from California to New York. And so and then scattered about the US territory. So we have a lot in Illinois for some reason, a few in Indiana, but pretty much all over, but East Coast, New York, and Connecticut, and then California are probably two of our biggest states outside of Colorado.
Great. So going back to you doing your master's and your doctorate at Colorado State University, did your program, was it in person?
Yes. So Colorado State so back when I did it years ago, I applied for the master's. And then once I was finished, I applied for their internship, and they accept, I think, anywhere from 4 to 8. And it's more of a traditional based internship program.
Great. So how can you compare? I mean, obviously it's different because what you're doing now is online and what you did back then was in person, but what kind of similarities and differences can you say about the two programs?
Yeah, because I work at Children's Hospital, we have an internship there that's traditional. And I work with those interns as well. So I could kind of just bring it to today and compare both. I would say there are a lot of similarities between traditional and our distance because we provide a lot of hands-on learning and support to our interns. So where I feel like Children's and CSU is a smaller pool of interns, they still meet with the director, once or twice a week, sometimes not even that. And then they fulfill their rotations with a bunch of different, preceptors. Same with the distance. The difference with the distances is obviously I oversee all the programming, but you have the flexibility to kind of cater who you want to do your hours with, as long as they fulfill ASCEND's requirements. So that's where it's dissimilar. The rigor of both are the same. And I think with our program, what I'm really proud of is I've been there almost 7 years, and I've changed the amount of hands-on instruction and like time that I get to see everybody face to face because of Zoom. And so it feels more traditional to me.
Yeah, I bet that feels more, like an RD.
Yeah.
Having more of that kind of stuff. So as an internship director, when you're looking at applications, because I'm sure you get a lot, are you looking, like, what do you look for in a candidate? Are you looking to see if they have like a master's before? Does it not matter? Like, what are some things that go through your head?
Yeah. So until 2024, I don't look at whether or not an applicant has a graduate degree. Once that's mandated, obviously I will. But I've really changed our application process to more of a holistic approach. As you heard me say, my undergrad was social work, sociology. I really like to get to know the applicants. It takes a little bit more time, but I interview every applicant, and I really want to get a feel for them. So what I look for are strong letters of recommendation from people, from professors, employers that really know you well. So I'm looking for somebody who, let's say you ask a professor to write you a letter of rec, but you've only taken one class from them a handful of years ago. That's not really that strong. So I'm looking for really strong letters of recommendation. I'm also really clued into personal statements and the interview, because it tells me a lot about a person. I think that you'll notice on our website that our post-baccalaureate, I do accept lower GPAs than most internships. That's because I think from my experience that there's always a reason that maybe somebody tanks a semester of undergrad and then works really hard and their trajectory is going up and they just couldn't get it past a certain GPA. If they can explain that, then those are typically some of my strongest interns who have actually kind of had some struggles or had to work full time and couldn't volunteer in the dietetics world and couldn't work on their academics 24/7. And so I really look at just the person. And that's what my selection committee does as well. We have a rubric where we really prioritize those things, the letters of rec and the personal statements.
So when you're doing the interviews, is it just, something like this where you and I would be talking, or is it your committee as well that partakes in the interviews?
Yeah, it's just me. And then because I really like to get to know people. And this year, because we had a handful of a lot of applications, a little more than usual, I did do some group interviews just to feel dynamics too. I'm a feeler. And so I can really pick up on professionalism. I'm looking for that. And I'm looking for a student intern that is flexible and truly has a lot of integrity in regards to their work ethic. And again, I keep going back to professionalism.
That's something that I feel like a lot of people are transitioning to, like, I don't want to say vibe checking, but like feeling it out, seeing like how you get along with that person. So I think not a lot of programs offer interviews. So I feel like it's really important because, a piece of paper can't really describe all your abilities. A resume and a transcript are great, but I feel like the personalized interaction is definitely better for.
I couldn't agree more.
So I know that for distance programs, we have to find our own preceptors and stuff like that. Do you guys have like, a list of things that people can go to, or is it, fend for yourself? How does that look like when students are trying to find preceptors?
Yeah, another great question. So we have a preceptor list, and when an applicant, a post-baccalaureate who's applying to the DI, can email dietetic.internship@unco.edu and request the preceptor list for your region. I always tell students request outside of your area because you might not get something close to home or where you live. So if you're flexible and you can get a Airbnb or sleep on a friend's or family's couch or whatever for a month, look there. And so get the preceptor list for everywhere. And then for the MSDI program, we actually have a supervised practice coordinator who helps the graduate students create their preceptors and their rotation. So they, after their first academic year, the supervised coordinator comes in that summer and gets them prepared for their rotations and scheduling everything. So they have support.
Yeah, but you said they don't do their internship until they complete their graduate degree, right?
So they complete
their master's.
So they have to complete the 2-year academic program, and then they matriculate into the distance dietetic internship. So we essentially have them for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And then what if you have students that are like, you know what, I just don't want to do the master's anymore? What happens to them? Can they trickle down into just the DI? Are they out of the program? What does that look like?
Yeah, we've never had that. But it is a 3-year program. And so you're accepted for the 2-year academics and the 1-year DI. So like any academic program, if you need to drop out, I guess you drop out, or you work with your advisor or me if you need to take an incomplete for a semester. I certainly have had students take incompletes from the DI for numerous reasons. And I just work with their preceptors to kind of reschedule them for either fall or summer or spring and just keep them going. But if they need a medical leave or something, I'm willing to work with them.
Of course. And then a lot of my peers are either, we go into the major gung-ho for it, like we love dietetics. Some people are, coming in as a second career. Some people transfer. There are just so many options. So for your program, do you see an array of people? Do you see, mainly second career individuals, or what does your applicant pool look like?
So it sounds similar to yours, a little bit of everything. So I know with our internship program, I have second bachelor's, traditional post-baccalaureates, interns with masters. I've had a handful of PhDs. So we really get across the board every type of intern and student.
So how did you fall into this role? I mean, I'm sure being a program director is not an easy job to have, managing all of these students, they're like the Ascend guidelines, stuff like that. So how did you fall into that role?
Oh, another really great question. I would have to say dietetics is a really small field. And the longer you're in it, the more you get to know different positions, even if you're not working in it. And you certainly get to know your community. And when this particular position opened up, I was still at Children's, and I taught at Metro State University of Denver. And I wanted a tenure track position where I could do research, teach, and then I thought it'd be super cool to be a dietetic internship director, even though I had zero experience. So essentially, Dr. Alina Clark, who was our department head, and the selection committee gave me a shot. And I just, as you said, learning the standards, that core competencies and whatnot is a lot of work, but they invested in me. They sent me to a training in Chicago. And, you know, I just, like you as a student, you just keep learning. And I always say to my students and interns, I'm a lifelong learner. So I like to be challenged. And this is certainly a position where I'm challenged every day. Something new probably is happening.
That's something that I've gathered, you know, again, from like all my peers. We don't want to just do our undergrad, do our internship, do the master's, and then be done. We want to continue learning for ourselves, for other people, to, I don't want to say better ourselves, but have a more well-rounded understanding of who we're going to be working with, what we're doing, why we're doing it, things like that. So speaking of that, what kind of research are you involved in?
Yeah. So my passion, my love is pediatrics, and in particular, autism spectrum disorders. And so my primary bucket of research is in autism. I have another project that's going on right now, and another professor, Dr. Katie Cage, who is our current department head. We are involved in developing clinical simulations. So for our students and interns. So that's another kind of side research for me. But my baby, if you will, is autism.
Definitely. Yeah. So that's, you know, something interesting, because I feel like as undergrads, we aren't aware of different type of things like, you know, Down syndrome or autism and how that relates to nutrition. So where did you get that? Why do you have that niche? Have you like fell into it with school or with, you know, a relationship of some sort, or how did you fall into that?
So I fell into it because of my son. And so when he was a little guy under the age of 2, he was diagnosed with a neurodevelopmental disorder. And I decided that I wanted to become the expert. He had a lot of gut GI issues, sleep disorders, and I wanted to be the expert. So I applied for a national training education grant called LIND. And LIND is usually for postdocs, but they accepted me as a pre-doc. And then I was a LIND fellow, and I would strongly recommend it. It's nationwide for anybody who's interested in individuals with intellectual disabilities, and it's leadership education in neurodevelopmental disorders. And it is an educational training grant. And I learned so much, and it's a multidisciplinary training program. And after my fellowship, I became a trainee. And then I was affiliated with Lynn for about 6 years. And since then, you know, I've always stuck there, and started a clinic specifically for ASD at Children's.
Oh, so you created, from my understanding, is that what you said?
Yeah, so really you hit the nail on its head when you said not a lot of nutrition and ASD and special needs is really combined together. And in Colorado, we didn't have anywhere that families could go, except they would get to me in a roundabout way. And I was in clinical nutrition, but they're in developmental pediatrics. And so I worked really hard to move myself into developmental peds. And because I am a full-time director and professor, I'm only there one day a week. And, but yeah, we got it so I could be in with developmental peds because it needs to be addressed in a multidisciplinary way.
Is there any way to try to incorporate that with the students that are going through your dietetic internship to be
Absolutely.
Like, so how do you implement that for those individuals?
So I present a case study always and do a lot of role playing. I think it's really important that today's dietitian, no matter where they go in the field, community, food service, clinical, you're going to happen upon somebody with autism spectrum disorders. It's 1 in 59 people. And so, I do a lot of education. Those who are really interested in it will then spend a day with me at Children's Hospital or a couple of Fridays with me so they can get more hands-on experience.
So when you're in that type of a setting, what do you do on a day-to-day, or I guess on a weekly basis with them?
Yeah, so in developmental peds, it's just, I act as an outpatient dietitian. And so I conduct nutritional assessments on the kiddos and then do a lot of follow-ups. And so usually with ASD, over 90% of these kiddos have GI issues and a lot of sleep. And so, they're feeding, they want to eat, but they just get pretty restrictive in eating for GI issues or sleep or sensory processing. They don't like certain colors or textures or, you name it, smells of food. So I work with them, but I also work with OT where we have to treat it through a multidisciplinary approach. Core deficits of autism with the rigidity and kind of that inflexibility, that's a huge deterrent to eating a variety of foods. So I just kind of, from a dietetic standpoint, I look for potential deficiencies and sometimes toxicities. And then if they're interested in certain diets, I'm going to work with them to make sure we prevent toxicities or deficiencies while working with probably OT and psych and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And
did that answer your question?
Definitely. Yeah, no, it did. So when you mentioned ASD, I was thinking, have I learned anything about it? And I just remember, having difficulty with certain foods because of the textures or the colors of something like that. But I feel like that's something we should learn, especially for those that are going into the pediatric world, to try to pick up on those signs. I don't want to say signs and symptoms, but the cues that this could be present. So that's really interesting that we're not taught that, or at least introduced to it in a surface level.
Yeah, I mean, picky eaters are so common among toddlers. And I think a lot of the theory is that they'll outgrow it. And so that's not the case often with children with special needs. They actually become more selective as they've grown into their kind of food selectivity. So I definitely agree. It should be something that, we talk about.
Great. And then I guess transitioning a little bit back more to the dietetic internship. So what are some misconceptions that you have, that you're aware of, that students have, or, prospective interns about the internship, and like what kind of stuff do you want to, I guess, clarify?
Yeah. One thing I think is really, I think students should know is, I've heard from other, professors or directors that students think that a distance program is less than a traditional one, meaning it's not as rigorous, it's not as challenging. That's not the case. I actually feel like it's a little bit more rigorous and challenging.
I was about to say the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because you really are your own manager too. And so you have a director who is there to support, but you have to be organized. You have to be professional. You're representing yourself. And you really don't have your cohort right there with you. So you're on your own. You're going to have to be resourceful and know who and when to ask questions, where to go. And so I think the rigor is almost more. And so I think that's a misconception. I also think another one on the opposite spectrum of that is that you're 100% on your own. You have no support. And that's not true either. You have, from a distance perspective, I feel like I give a lot of support. So the interns know that they can call me, text me, set up a Zoom, whatever they need, I'm gonna do for them. And I, like I said, provide a lot of opportunities to be a cohort, to be together on Tuesday nights, to talk about our experiences, to work through challenging cases that are real, that they're bringing to us. So I feel like a distance program in today's world is best of both worlds. And I think you can make it, you can cater it to whatever you want. We also have a full-time and a part-time option. And some interns do both when they're with me. So some preceptors want full-time and some want part-time. So it's just really flexible. And so I think that's such a, a lot of applicants don't realize how flexible it can be as well.
Definitely. So when you have these people that are applying, so I know we're obviously in a pandemic right now. No one is, hidden to that. So what kind of advice did you have for students that really want to get experience, but we just can't because we can't get into the hospitals and things where, we want to interact with patients?
That's a good question. I would say, again, to be persistent and professional, because even though you might not be able to get in traditionally speaking, I know a lot of dietitians in this country that need and want volunteers and interns because they're learning a different job, or they're needing informatics, or they could really use somebody to sit in with challenging clients. And so I would say still keep pursuing those opportunities and pursue them a little differently. Make sure when you contact a preceptor that you know about them, their facility, what they do, and then say why you want to be a volunteer or you'd like to intern. Give them more information than just an email that says, "Hi, I'm a student at University of Maryland and I'm looking for volunteer hours." So let them know that you've done your homework and that you're serious about it. And again, just be persistent.
Mm-hmm. That's something I actually heard, or I was talking to one of my friends with, because we were trying to find, when I came here as a sophomore, trying to figure out, I want experience. And then I sent an email. I'm like, "Hi, I applied to one of the hospitals to shadow an outpatient. I'm like, "Hi, I'm really interested in learning more about diabetes and things of that nature. I know you're an outpatient, blah, 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 blah." And then my peer wrote, "Hi, I'm a UMD, intern. I'm a UMD student. I'm interested in volunteering, period, send." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Don't you want, the dialogue, get like more personal?" So that's something I learned from, fortunately, a younger age, to personalize it
Mm-hmm.
So to show that you're interested and invested, not that you just want something to put on your resume.
Mm-hmm. I remember way back when I started kind of the second bachelor's at CSU to get my prereqs, I really pounded the pavement to get in as a WIC volunteer for, I'd say, a couple months. And then finally I got in as a volunteer, and then they hired me as PRN. And so, I just think persistence and professionalism gets you your name and gets you everything in this field.
Definitely. And I feel like that's a really good piece of advice for students, being persistent, but being respectful and professional and things of that nature, because persistence can also come off as, annoying or arrogant, something like that. For students that are on the fence for applying to University of Northern Colorado and maybe another program, or choosing which one to put for number one, something like that, what winning bit would you try to share with them to push them to choose your program over another program?
Yeah. Well, there's so many wonderful programs. But again, I think the personalization of our distance programs, our faculty is so dedicated to our students, the MS students. It's a really tight community, and we offer a lot of support. And while being a rigorous program, I think the dietetic internship portion, the flexibility that I work with students and preceptors is, I've heard is not typical. And so I think, that along with our concentrations, we have two amazing concentrations, one in management and another in nutrition education and counseling, two very appropriate and meaningful concentrations. And then I also think the support and the resources that we provide our interns, such as RD exam prep help, interviewing help, reviewing of cover letters, working on the next step, is also something I've heard that isn't often done. Because of my background in sociology, I also really am mindful about stress management, and I have stress management stuff every week. I have our counseling center come in and really talk about stress management. And so I focus on the whole person instead of just completing the core competencies. So I think what sets us apart is how we prepare our interns to become professionals in this field, while being very mindful of self-care and your well-being. So,
wow, not many people care. I don't want to say not many people care about the whole student, but giving them the resources, that's something that I haven't heard of, from whether it's, going to virtual open houses for internships, or even choosing undergraduate dietetic programs, the DPDs. Unfortunately, sometimes it just boils down to numbers, but taking care of the whole person, I don't know, I feel like that's something really important that a lot of people should take away.
Absolutely.
But, yeah,
absolutely. I forced a 16-hour off that I accounted for the hours for the interns. And I had a handful of interns call me and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable taking off this time. And I said, we need to work on that. That should be a self goal, because you can't continue at this pace the rest of your life. And so let's work together and really recognizing self-care. And I think everyone who is in this field, everyone I've met, is a go-getter, who is motivated, who is smart. And sometimes I think what isn't taught in our profession is that self-care. And to me, that's probably one of the most important things as a director. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Withrow, for taking time out to talk to us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Hope to see your application
Soon.